I cannot believe week 2 of the fantasy baseball season is already wrapping up. And with that being said, I have 10 players that you need to add to your team that are going to give you a leg up over your opponent this weekend and going into week 3, and might as well be the rest of the season on today's action-packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we're your number one source of fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Dominick Martino. You can find me on Twitter at DomMartinoFB. Riding solo tonight, as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, Matt is on vacation, so you're just going to have me here tonight. If you are watching on YouTube and you haven't already, hit that little bell below. It's going to subscribe you to the channel and give you a notification every time we drop a new episode. Or if you're listening on the audio side of things on a platform like Apple or Spotify that allows 5-star ratings and reviews, we would truly appreciate it if you do that for us as well. And lastly, but what's most important to you guys and Matt and I this time of year, give us a chance on the Subtext platform. Through Subtext, it's an in-depth personalized experience where you're going to get text message alerts right to your phone, offering so much more than we can in these 30-minute episodes. And this time of year on Subtext, you're going to get so much, that's going to give you a leg up over your opponents, that secret weapon, that secret special stuff that's going to put you over the top, including but not limited to, these waiver wire episodes. We're going to go in a little bit deeper, rank these guys for you, give you a little bit of an explanation on them. We're going to have those call-up alerts going right to your phone, offering so much more than we can in these 30-minute episodes. So you know what? You might as well check us out on Subtext. The link is in the bio if you're listening, watching, and it's available on any of our social media platforms. And guys, with that being said, I mentioned it up top, I'm by myself today. Matt's on vacation. So we're going to lock in for, these 30 minutes, and I got 10 names for you that you should be very interested in adding to your fantasy baseball team. The first one up today is Walker Buehler. Walker Buehler, very interesting man. Finally had a good start his last time out. Was a little bit shaky in his first two. Makes the move over from the Dodgers to Boston. And, we always like to talk about this with, guys that go over to new teams. There's so much more that goes into it than we realize. You got to move. You got to get the family all together, adjusted. If you have a wife and kids, all that kind of stuff. And it's just not all baseball stuff all the time, right? A lot of adjustments, a new park, new teammates, a new coaching staff, new ownership, meeting a lot of new people. So sometimes it takes time to adjust, right? But Walker Buehler's last start was great. He pitched against the Toronto Blue Jays at home in Boston, went 6.1 innings, gave up 1 earned run, struck out 7. It was 4 hits and 1 walk. You'd like to see him not walking guys. Buehler said this is the first time in a couple of years that he really started to feel like himself. I think this is something that we can get a hold of. I think there might be something here with Buehler. I don't know if he'll ever be, back to the Cy Young contender that he was about 4 or 5 years ago, but he can still be a serviceable fantasy baseball, guy on your team, starting pitcher. 49% rostered on Yahoo. I think it should be up a little further. He definitely deserves the chance. Like I said, he was a Cy Young contender in the past. There's no reason to think he can't get back to maybe 75% of that. And like I said, that's probably around a mid-3s ERA, around a K per 9. The whip should get better as he, grooves along. This is a guy who also hasn't pitched a lot of innings, the last few years, right? Give you the exact inning totals over the last few seasons for Buehler because, it just hasn't been a lot due to injuries and all that other stuff. So last year, Buehler threw only 75. In 2022, he threw 65. In 2021, he did throw 207. The COVID years before that, he only threw 36. So he hasn't, been able to build up. I think Buehler has a chance now. Maybe not my favorite guy we're talking about. Potentially my favorite starting pitcher, or if not one of the. But add him now before, if he goes out there, and I think it's against Tampa Bay next time, it's a pretty good spot for him to go out there and, throw another quality start, to be honest with you. So I'm adding Walker Buehler where I can. Starting pitchers, I'll say this about starting pitchers real quick before I move on to the next guy. It's tough. We can grab a lot of starting pitchers now that wind up being on our rosters all year, and it gets thinner and thinner as we go along. You get less and less guys getting called up. You get, it winds up being tougher. So guys like Buehler who have a track record is somebody just you might not want to pass up on. But let's move on to Buehler's teammate. Let's talk about Richard Fitts. Very interesting pitcher. He is, if you guys catch this episode as it's releasing on Friday night, you might be able to go out there and grab Richard Fitts for his start against the White Sox on Saturday. If you're listening on Saturday and you have same day ads, you might be still able to go out there and grab Richard Fitts. He is 9% owned on Yahoo. A couple of, his first two starts were tough, but he gave you length, right? He gave you 6 innings both times out in his first 2 starts, gave up 3 earned runs both times. Was a little bit shakier, with the command his second time out against Toronto. Once again, we're talking about Richard Fitts here. Gave up 6 hits and 4 walks, but the first time was a lot better against Texas. Kept the whip a little bit cleaner in that first start. Like I said, Fitts can be a potentially interesting guy here. Had a good spring training, had some buzz around him. Is still fairly young at 25 years old. So there could be something here with a guy like Fitz. And, he did throw 20 innings last year, that were fairly successful in the minors. So he's somebody that's behind Buehler, behind a couple of the other names today. Like I said, 9% owned on Yahoo for Fitz. So not somebody I'm rushing out to the waiver wire to pick up, but I definitely want to see what the future holds for a guy like Fitz, because it could be interesting, eventually in fantasy. Don't ever expect him to be a K per 9, fully kind of guy. Whip might be a little bit shaky at times. Could be, a less enticing version of Walker Buehler, as I should switch over to the Richard Fitz tab here on YouTube for the guys watching over on YouTube. So once again, Richard Fitz could be an interesting option. 9% owned on Yahoo. Boston Red Sox starting pitcher. Not my favorite guy of the day, but if you're playing a deeper league and some of these other names are gone, you could look his way, especially for this White Sox start. Once again, which is Saturday. If you catch this episode on Friday, you should be able to add him. But also, if you have same day ads, and you can add him, go out there and take advantage of it. Let's move on to this next guy. Somebody I'm actually very excited to talk about. It's Gavin Williams. Had a monster spring training. Hasn't been able to follow through as much as we would like here, in his first, go around here in 2025. Had a pretty good first start, against Kansas City, 5 innings. Didn't give you the strikeouts, only 2 strikeouts, but it was only 2 earned runs. Didn't really allow too much damage in that one. Went out there in the second start against the Angels, only gave you 3 innings, got rocked around a bit, struck out 5, didn't have his best stuff that night. But, on April 10th, his last start, Gavin Williams against the White Sox, pitched 5 innings, got the win, 7 strikeouts, gave up a run, and, kept the damage to a very minimal amount. He's down to 51% owned on Yahoo. This might be the opportunity to get in on, the Gavin Williams breakout before, he really takes it to that level like he was showing in spring training. And, it's just somebody who has really good stuff. He's got a good fastball. He's got good secondary stuff. So with a guy like Gavin Williams, we really don't want to miss out. So the next step here for Gavin Williams is just to give us a little bit more length. We need to start seeing those 6-7 inning starts. And if he can start doing that and, we start seeing those, the length and the strikeout upside here, Gavin Williams has top 30s, starting pitcher upside. So you're not going to find a guy like this on the wire that has this kind of upside. Strikeout potential, is on a good team like the Guardians. He could get some wins and stuff like that. So Gavin Williams, probably one of my more favorite guys to add here, of the bunch today. Before we move on and talk about, we got a couple more good starting pitchers. I'll tease one of them. We got Max Meyer, and then we'll get into the hitters. We got Sean Murphy and a bunch more names like that coming up next. And all right, guys, I want to talk to you guys about my friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage now. It's your turn. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. And once again, you're going to do all of that on supplyhouse.com. And all right, guys, before we jump back into this, I just want to talk to you guys once again about giving us a chance on the Subtext. You guys know through Subtext, we offer so much more than we can in these 30-minute episodes. Like I was talking about earlier, those prospect call-ups, you're going to get those text messages and alerts right to your phone before anybody else in the industry is getting them to you, with names like Roman Anthony, Andrew Painter, and much more getting called up. This year, you're going to want to be able to add those players to your team before your league mates. And with those notifications you're going to be getting from us from Subtext, you're going to be able to do that faster than anybody else. And then, like with these waiver wire episodes, these 10 players that we're talking about, we're going to break them down for you, just giving you a little bit more extra detail and ranking them in the priority that you should be picking them up in. So once again, check us out on Subtext if that sounds good to you guys. The link is in the bio if you're listening or watching, and it's available on any of our social media platforms. So let's keep things pushing here, guys. Let's wrap things up with these couple of starting pitchers, and then we'll move into some bats with the rest of the episode. Let's talk about Zebby Matthews. Zebby Matthews is somebody who plays for the Minnesota Twins, starting pitcher. He has not been called up yet, but here's the thing. He had a really good spring training, 9 innings in spring training, 12 strikeouts, only 1 walk, 4 hits, was dominant, has been pretty solid so far, down in the minors. Just Zebby Matthews is somebody who I see getting the call, pretty soon, to be honest with you. So far through 2 starts in the minors, he has a 1.80 ERA, 10 innings pitched, 13 strikeouts, and an 0.6 whip. This kid's blossoming right before our eyes. He was a pretty high-end prospect, back when he got drafted. And, he is still, fairly young, 24 years old. He's 6'5", 225. You like the frame on a guy like Zebby Matthews. And he's somebody I'm stashing, honestly, now. Honestly, I'm going out there and I'm grabbing Zebby Matthews. I'm in, a bunch of competitive leagues. He's been grabbed in all of those over the past couple of days with the Pablo Lopez injury. He did not get promoted, with that, Pablo Lopez injury. It was actually David Festa. But I don't see Zebby Matthews being down for much longer, whether it's injury, whether he forces their hand, whatever it may be. He's 18% owned on Yahoo. If you have the extra NA spot in your league, I'd grab him. If you have deep benches, I'd grab them. Anything other than that, if you're in a situation when you really don't have the roster spot and you need the active guy to get the stats, I'm throwing Zebby Matthew on my watch list, and then subscribing to us on Subtext so you get that alert when a guy like Zebby Matthews is called up. But he's somebody you definitely want to keep your eyes on. Got great stuff. Like I said, big baseball frame. Once again, Zebby Matthews, Minnesota Twins, definitely somebody that I'm keeping my eye on, and I'm stashing him if I can. Let's move on to the next guy. I'm actually really happy. I'm really happy we're talking about this guy today. Max Meyer. If you guys are a fan of Matt and I, we've been doing this podcast for, actually surprisingly almost 4 years now. Max Meyer, when he, first got was, his prospect type was buzzing, and, he was about to get the call, was somebody I was talking about a lot. Unfortunately, a couple of injuries, Tommy John, just got the better of him, and he had been out for a while, right? Max Meyer is finally starting to look right. 2 out of his 3 starts have been, pretty good this year. He did give us, we'll run through them all real quick. On March 30th against the Pirates, gave us 5.2 innings, 7 strikeouts, gave up a run, 1.06 whip in that one. Against Atlanta was a little bit tougher, 6 innings, struck out 8, but gave up 3 earned runs. The damage was, coming around, too many walks, hits. Didn't look great for him. But then against the Mets, Max Meyer really shined, and the Mets are a good team too. So 6.1 innings, got a win, 4 strikeouts, no earned, 0.63 whip. In that one, really kept the runners off the bases, and goes against a pretty good Arizona lineup on April 15th. I'm grabbing Max Meyer where I can, where he's available, because a guy like this who was a high-end prospect, everything's starting to come together for him. Could be well over a K per 9, could be a lows 3 ERA kind of guy, and if he can keep those runners off base like he's been doing so far, the whip could be good too. So this is a guy, honestly, has really, really high upside, 35% owned on Yahoo. Max Meyer, once again, Miami Marlins is who I'm talking about here. Absolutely love the kid. He's stellar. He's fantastic. Arguably my favorite pitcher that I've talked about so far today. With that being said, guys, let's move into the bats, right? Let's talk about a former All-Star, right? Let's talk about Geraldo Perdomo. Honestly, very, very interesting. We were just talking about that hot Diamondbacks team. He's been leading off for them on the year. 7 runs, 2 homers, 13 RBIs, 2 steals, hitting .333. In Perdomo's last game on April 9th, went 3 for 4 with a homer. Kid's heating up. 34% owned on Yahoo. Shortstop eligible. Like I said, Perdomo was an All-Star. I believe it was if it wasn't last year, it was 2 years ago. I'm going to fact check myself here in a second. But Perdomo's got upside. He's still fairly young. Only 25 years old, and I know it was 2 years ago. Perdomo was an All-Star in 23. Didn't even struggle a little bit last year. Just didn't really play too much. Only 98 games. He's not somebody who's going to give you much power. The speed is pretty good. If he's leading off, the runs are going to be good. The batting average is usually pretty plus with him. If you're looking at last year. Anyway, I think he could be a 260 hitter. 80 runs. You're talking about a guy who could steal maybe 20 plus bags, maybe 25. Perdomo, I'm at him. See where the thing goes. Just he has to complement your team, right? So if you're looking for a guy, you need power. Your team's struggling in power. I'm probably not going to go out there and add Perdomo. But you know what? He does everything else really good. He doesn't chase. He doesn't whiff. He doesn't strike out. That bodes well for him keeping up a strong batting average. So like I said, think of like a D. Gordon light almost with when you're picking up a Geraldo Perdomo. But somebody I really do like. Like I said, he has the skill set. He's not going to be like, a blow you away kind of guy. But like I said, you need steals, you need runs, you need batting average. Perdomo was somebody that I would go out there and take a look at. Perdomo, once again, Arizona Diamondback shortstop. He is currently 34% owned on Yahoo, but that is currently jumping up pretty fast. So go out there and grab him while you can. Love what he can do. Let me move on to this next guy, who actually I like a little bit more. Let me talk about Sean Murphy here. Braves catcher, another guy just has dealt with a lot of injuries recently. Finally seems like he's healthy. Doesn't really have Travis d'Arnaud or William Contreras, hunting down his job at the moment. Does have Drake Baldwin, though. Drake Baldwin, who hasn't performed well so far, but Drake Baldwin is no slouch. First 3 games, he's looked pretty solid. Sean Murphy, that is. 273 batting average, 2 runs, a homer, 4 RBIs. He went 2 for 4 with, a homer and 4 RBIs in his first game. He's been bad. He's been all over the lineup, actually, so far. He hit 8th in his debut, then 6th, then 5th. If he can settle in that 5th, 6th spot, that's going to actually be really good for Sean Murphy. You're going to get you a lot of RBIs. He's a catcher, 20 home runs, 260, a lot of RBIs. Runs could be solid too. I like what Sean Murphy brings to the table, and he's still only 30% owned on Yahoo. If you lost to Ivan Herrera's, if you're just dealing with a struggling catcher at the moment, Sean Murphy definitely could be the answer. And, I was on, if you guys didn't check out, I was on the Locked On Astros podcast the other day, did a segment with Eric, just talking some fantasy baseball, and Sean Murphy is somebody that we talked about. And he's just one of those guys that, just is we know who he is at this point in his career. It's not about the talent; it's more about the health. And we talked about guys like Yordan Alvarez. We just talked about, making sure that we understand it's still super early in the season, and a guy like Sean Murphy who's proven, just pick him up now, because you're not going to be able to pick up a guy like Murphy at the catcher position 2-3 weeks, a month from now. So do it while you still can. But with that being said, guys, before we move into the rest of these hitters, and just have a lot of fun with names like Jacob Wilson and more. Those names are coming up next. And all right, guys, let's jump back in here and let's talk about a fun name. Let's talk about Zach McKinstry. Interesting, not, the most sexy or enticing name that we're going to talk about today, but somebody who could, be interesting for fantasy. And McKinstry, he's been off to a hot start so far for those Detroit Tigers. Across his, first 35 at-bats, he's hitting .371, 7 runs, a homer, 6 RBIs, and a steal. The thing that's interesting about McKinstry, though, is his eligibility on Yahoo. Second, third, shortstop, and outfield, right? 24% owned. McKinstry's going to be, for those, he should be out there in a couple 15-mans, those leagues with those deep benches, your AL onlys, stuff like that, where McKinstry can really shine. And, like I said, 24% owned on Yahoo. The position eligibility, you're going to be able to plug and play him anywhere. Corner infield, middle infield, shortstop, outfield. The only thing he doesn't really play is catcher and pitcher, and first. But, it's still a lot of eligibility. McKinstry might not be a guy who hangs around all year long, but it's definitely a juice to orange situation. Definitely a guy that could be like a little spicy add-in and trade or something like that. Because he literally plays almost every position. He's looked pretty solid so far. Been moved all around that Detroit Tigers lineup. Hit leadoff a few times, hit sixth a bunch, hit ninth. So I like the fact that, he's hitting leadoff, on occasion. He's hitting ninth on occasion. That turnover of that Detroit lineup is driving him in with those, 7 runs already so far. 11 games played too for McKinstry. Just throwing that out there. But he's someone who could be interesting. Not my favorite guy of the day. Not a must add. Like I mentioned earlier, more of a deeper league play. So go out there and grab McKinstry in those situations. Let's move on to somebody who has actually become quite the darling of this podcast. Let's talk about Jacob Wilson again. And you guys might not have heard us the first, second, or third time we did this because Wilson's only 39% owned on Yahoo. And the thing is, he just keeps getting it done, so we got to keep talking about him. Wilson, through his first 13 games, is hitting .398, 8 runs, 2 homers, 7 RBIs, hasn't even started stealing bags yet. Another guy who's been bouncing around the lineup. A lot of guys are bouncing around the lineup, so, at this time, just because teams are trying to figure out where everybody works. Not really hasn't been in great spots. Has been hitting anywhere between 6, 7, and 9. I don't think he hit 8th yet. He hit 5th once. But you know what? As recently as April 8th, Wilson went 2 for 4, 3 for 4 with 2 runs. The day before that, he went 2 for 4 with a run. He's been actually on a little hit streak here. Has he hit safe in every game? Yeah, he actually, Jacob Wilson has officially, hit safe in every game so far this season. So it's a nice little 13-game hit streak riding here for Jacob Wilson. Arguably my favorite player to add right now. Can't understand why he's still only 39% owned on Yahoo. Shortstop has been a little bit tough, been a couple injuries so far. I think Jacob Wilson is honestly a must add at this point. And even what Wilson did in his small sample size last year just was super interesting. Wasn't amazing. But also, I forget whether it's his uncle, who played, major league, ball back in the day. Definitely has it in the blood because he's been, really, really good so far, in his major league career. And what he did last year actually was 28 games, hit 250, didn't really hit any home runs. So actually I'm blanking here, guys. Please forgive me there. It was what he did in the minors that was super interesting, right? And as I pull that up here. So in 2024 in the minors, Jacob Wilson hit .433, 7 homers, stole a few bags, 39 RBIs, 48 runs. He's got pop, not so much speed, could steal a bag here or there, but I think he could be super interesting in this Athletics lineup. Let's move on to somebody else, we've talked about here and there, but, while he's still hitting good, you got to make sure that you guys are, getting these names, got to add them. Let's talk Ben Rice, New York Yankees, former catcher. He is a big, beefy guy if you ever seen one. Not super tall, but he's got that, muscle on him. Another guy who's still just been slugging along, hit a home run on the 9th. He's been hitting first and second in this dangerous for Yankees lineup, and it's been showing through 11 games. Rice already has 9 runs, 3 homers, 4 RBIs, and 2 steals. I just think Rice is kind of going under the radar, like guys with Soderstrom, and a couple other first basemen, Torkelson, and other guys have taken off a little bit too and overshadowed Rice. But Rice is absolutely no slouch at all. Like I said, he's got pop. He plays in the small Yankee Stadium, a great lineup to be hitting in, especially for fantasy. 46% owned for Ben Rice, just the first base eligibility. Fortunately, doesn't have that catcher eligibility anymore. Remember the days when Yahoo would leave catcher eligibility on everybody forever. If you played second at catcher, if you even thought about playing catcher, you get the eligibility on Yahoo. But I really like what Ben Rice brings to the table. Not my favorite pickup, of all the guys we talked about, but somebody who's interesting. If you need some pop, if you need some runs, even RBIs, could be interesting here with Rice in this Yankees lineup. The batting average, I don't think is going to last forever. So if you're looking for batting average, I really wouldn't count on Rice for that, guys. But with that being said, that is pretty much all the names I have for today. But just do want to talk a little bit of fantasy baseball with you guys before I head out. Still early in the season, and kind of still just do want to stress this isn't the time to overreact. If you got some struggling stars, you definitely don't want to move them for cheap. And it kind of applies the other way around, actually. I think people get caught up, more on the side of what do I do with my struggling guys instead of going out there and saying, hey, let me take advantage of, some of these struggling guys and acquire them. I always say Matt is very good at, talking about that. Matt is, an expert of, capitalizing, this time of year. I remember in one league, I told Matt, everybody in the league, I was like, you got to stop letting Matt take advantage of you on these trades. But that's exactly what you want to do. You want to go out there and find, the struggling stars, the Yordan Alvarez's of the world, and so on and so forth. And you want to acquire them now for, even if it's 85 cents on the dollar, what they were going for on draft day. You're winning. You're winning in a trade like that. So don't overreact. Do what you can. Get the job done. And if you got questions, once again, keeper, dynasty, no matter what, AL, NL only. If you got any questions, join Matt and I on the Subtext platform, and we can help you out. We love talking with you guys on there, just chopping it up. Talking fantasy baseball, talking regular baseball, talking about your team. Send us over your lineups, give you a little bit of analysis on them and stuff like that. So if you are interested in joining us on the Subtext platform, guys, check us out. It's available on any of our social media platforms. It's available wherever you're listening or watching. And we truly do appreciate all the support you guys have given us. We're doing this podcast, going on 4 years now, as I mentioned. And it's truly just been a blessing and an honor to sit here and, 5 times a week talk fantasy baseball with all of you guys. But with that being said, please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, rate, and review. And shout out to our everydayers and new listeners for making Locked On Fantasy Baseball your first listen each and every day. And after you make us your first listen, go out and check out our boy Sully over on Locked On MLB and make him your second listen each and every day. He does a great job of covering the league over there in a little bit of a different way than we do. We do our little fantasy baseball things over here. Sully over at Locked On MLB, just throws a regular, baseball take on things. So once again, after you make us your first listen, go and check out our boy Sully over at Locked On MLB. Make him your second listen each and every day. And guys, that is all for me today. So make sure you lock on. We got a new episode coming for you tomorrow, actually, as well. So check that one out, guys. It's always fun being here with you. So until next time, see ya.